sends her regards. Apologies, he's unable to join us, so I'm going to do it solo. And I'm going to start off by picking up on Robin's last point and hoping that you were all able to take in Ian Tyndall's presentation this morning, because he did a fine job of laying out the pitfalls facing us as human research ethics committees. As you can see, the criteria that we have on which to judge these applications is scant. So we felt we needed to develop criteria. We also felt that we were able to consider these applications. Of the ethics chairs I've talked to in my region, none of the others are willing to do it at this point. We are certified at a high level by NHMRC, and we do have the hospital's full support. So we made it known to inquiries that we got that we were able to receive applications, and we've just approved our first prescriber. And as you saw from Robin's talk, their next stage is to go to Robin at the TGA. Now, I've been working closely with Robin and with others at the TGA, and one of the things we tried to do is develop a parallel pathway, or a concurrent pathway instead of a consecutive pathway. That is, work together with TGA on the approval process instead of us approving, then sending it to them with the possibility that something TGA could do could change the approval, so it would have to come back to us for reconsideration. We haven't been able to reach that stage, but we have been able to work in close cooperation. But as Robin said, there's a lot of research that needs doing. All of the evidence needed isn't available as yet. A lot of that is because obviously you can't do a blinded study on psychedelics. People know whether they're on the psychedelic or not in the trial. So we made the decision when we decided that we would entertain applications to require every applicant to apply as a phase 4 clinical trial. Now, our approved prescriber has had to strip out all the indications of clinical trial when going to the TGA. But for a number of reasons, we said this has to be research as well as practice. One, there's a lot more research needed. So lessons learned from prescribing here in Australia. And Australia is ahead of most of the world in authorizing this being psilocybin for severe depression untreatable by anything else, and MDMA, street name ecstasy, for PTSD untreatable by anything else. And so we've required that applicants be a phase 4 trial. Doing that also provides indemnity for the HREC in the hospital, which we wouldn't otherwise have. And it's a valid point that this really is more for the domain of a clinical ethics committee than a human research ethics committee. The nature of training, what is adequate training? It's an open question. There is a lot of training available. The best of it seems to be through the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, known as MAPS. They put on training programs that are well regarded, and there are other organizations. There was a week-long seminar last week on psychedelics that was highly informative. But there's new research coming out all the time, and I thought I'd share with you some of the research that's come out just in the last month since we've been doing our approval. And if you want links to these papers, I'm happy to provide them, and I'll put them in the notes for our conference. Azevedo just published a study on the deontological ethics of psychedelic assisted therapy. So particularly relevant to us, what are the ethical issues we should be looking at? Walker put out a paper, which is an excellent primer on the chemistry and pharmacology of these medicines. Ponomarenko and Gasser just published a paper on groups. And as Robin pointed out, this is individual therapy. This is one psychiatrist with a patient. And you saw the picture Robin put up. The current model that's being advanced in Australia by the TGA is a patient is in a bed with a blindfold, psychiatrist on one side, clinical psychologist on the other side, listening to new age music through headphones. Begs the question, what if the patient would benefit from getting up and moving around, maybe going outside for a walk, maybe listening to something other than new age music, Mozart, or God forbid, Megadeth, who knows? Might that be part of the therapy? And continuing in my list so Ponomarenko and Gasser have talked about group therapy, which is not on the line yet for us, but there are people that have been doing this. In Switzerland, this kind of therapy has been done since the 1980s. And in places like, for example, Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard University in Boston, there's a major center on psychedelic research. So I went to both of those places and sat down and spent a deal of time with people that are doing this therapy and learned a lot and informed my committee based on those meetings. In Switzerland now, and for a long time, they've been treating people in groups, not individually. And what they have found is that for the final third of the trip, and by the way, the psilocybin dosages that we're talking about are quite high. These people seriously trip out on these drugs. And what the Swiss have found that in the last third of the session, if people are brought outside for a nature walk, most of the revelations, most of the insights, most of the breakthroughs occur there. So in the future, that's where we're going to be headed. And the other paper I'll point out is that Perez just this month published a systematic review and a meta-analysis on psilocybin, summing up the knowledge gained so far. So we determined that people would apply to us as a phase 4 clinical trial, as well as the criteria that Robin's talked about. It's also been mentioned by Ian that an independent review would be a good idea. And as I mentioned, I've consulted with people that have been doing this for a while, and we also convene a team in our hospital, the hospital psychiatrist, chief of medicine, and chief of pharmacology, and we have those people review the application, and we'll have them review future applications before they come to us. The question of psychiatrist training comes up. I mentioned the MAPS training, and so there are trainings available, and that's probably the best training available. The other question that comes up, and it comes up often, is should the psychiatrist have experienced the psychedelic experience themselves? And the literature is back and forth on this. There's no consensus. The folks in Switzerland and in Boston told me that was the first question prospective patients asked was, have you done this? And in that treatment community, there's also some difference of opinion on the importance of that. Some people feel it's very important that the psychiatrist has experienced this. Others feel that it's not absolutely necessary. And Ian mentioned this morning that he doesn't know any psychiatrists that are willing to sit with a patient all day long while they're on this trip. As a matter of fact, there are psychiatrists that are quite willing. I've talked to quite a few, and our application came from psychiatrists that were willing to do this. In Switzerland, a psychiatrist does attend to people in this therapy throughout the therapy. As time goes on, I think we'll see this evolve to the point where a clinical psychologist may be deemed adequately able, if appropriately trained through MAPS or otherwise, to carry on this therapy. Monitoring of psychedelic assisted therapy is difficult. Controlled conditions, and I mentioned that the controlled conditions that are being advised now probably will be relaxed so that more freedom of movement, freedom of selection of music, etc., are possible for patients. Oh, Ian brought up what a medically controlled setting would be. And that's fairly simple. This therapy needs to be conducted in a hospital setting or in private rooms of a psychiatrist, and that is exactly how it's being done now. We also required that anybody we approve report not annually, but quarterly to us. And we've wrestled with what the nature of those reports should be. Certainly number of people treated, any adverse events, any perception of benefit or not of the therapy itself. And we also developed a checklist of criteria that we were going to use for. And Kelly Parker, our coordinator, who would have loved to have been here today but couldn't, develop that checklist. And we're finding that quite useful. And as that's further developed, we will be happy to make that available for others. there was a heavy burden on our coordinator for this. This is a new area. This is uncharted territory for us. Kelly put in an awful lot of work with our initial applicant, and also in helping me do the research and do the coordination to get ourselves up to speed for this, and to get our committee up to speed for this. And the committee had quite a few concerns. One committee member raised the concern of how would the therapist make sure that the dosage was actually ingested and that the recipient didn't hide it under their tongue to resell later on the street, which is a valid concern if any of you have been involved in methadone treatment for heroin addiction, where clients are often motivated to try to hide the drug, spit it out after they received it, and sell it on the street to get money to buy heroin. That concept completely doesn't apply here because the people are there desirous of getting the treatment. I should say that the people who will be treated in the near term under this scheme are people who are seriously ill with depression and PTSD that hasn't been amenable to any other form of treatment. And they're also rich because there's nobody who is paying for this treatment. People have to pay for it out of pocket. And the costs are in the $30,000 range. And that's my other prediction, that this cost will come down. And it needs to, because there are many populations that could clearly benefit from this treatment based on the research that's been so far published, for whom it's unavailable so far. First and foremost, military personnel with PTSD who would benefit from MDMA therapy. Going back through Ian's, my notes on Ian's talk this morning, I think I've been through everything that he put out, and I think I've given you a thumbnail sketch of where we are with it. We're happy we're involved in this. It's been difficult. We consider it worthwhile. The hospital considers it worthwhile.
Thanks, Hudson. I think you said you have been accredited, or you've nominated yourself to approve this. Do I understand you correctly? Townsville HREC has been approved to... No,
our accreditation as an HREC from NHMRC, not specifically for this, just as an HREC. And I think that's why we're getting application. The application we approved is not from anywhere near where we are geographically.
Yeah, no, your fame clearly has spread far and wide. I just kind of was wondering if this would be restricted to certain HRECs, and potentially it should be. One may have to demonstrate, as you say, the criteria that you have been developing, or maybe just the certified HRECs.
Well, we haven't put ourselves out as the go-to HREC above all others. In fact, if anybody is involved in this or has, Robin didn't mention it, but I believe there have been 2 other approvals. Ours is in the pipeline. So if any of you are involved in this or have approved a prescriber, I'd love to touch base with you and coordinate lessons learned.
Very good. Okay, I think that might do us there, Hudson. No shattering questions in the chat, but thank you for providing an update of where you are as Townsville University HREC with your psilocybin prescribing, or authorized prescribing, I should say. And